What's up, everyone? Welcome to the latest episode of Power Spike. It's your boy, Remote dGon here, alongside Jamada and Yamato, as we have a fantastic MSI on our hands and all the coverage that you need right here, right now. Guys, it happened. T1 has been toppled at an international event by someone who was not from the East. G2 take them down. And that is where we are going to start with this week's Fraud Alert. It's T1. Gentlemen, I mean, we saw it. We saw the reverse sweep about to happen too. It was like, ah, shit, we dropped game 3. Game 4 not going so well. BB's doing his best, but Paze is just popping people in the head on the Caitlyn. Here comes the reverse. Okay, we got him once, but it didn't lead to the end of the game. They're gonna fucking do the thing. Faker's gonna do the thing. Someone's gonna Doran on Doloff. He's gonna do the thing. And somehow G2 get it over the line and get the biggest upset since, what, 2019? Against, T1 or whatever that was a long time ago. It was the quote that MSI used, that LOL Esports used, where I think it was Faker saying, you've been talking about 2019 for such a long time, and then he gets it coming to him here in 2026 in front of the crowd. It's no longer just the library in Busan. It is the silence in dGon. I'll figure out something there in the future. Yamato, you watched it live. I saw you do your rankings afterwards on your stream. What is the fraudulency scale here on T1, and how do you adjudicate that?
Honestly, from T1 side, I think it's just a question. When we talk about T1 through the lens of fraudulency, we gotta kind of frame what our expectations were in the first place. I think when it came to the solo lanes of T1, we had less expectations. We did think that this would be a potential weak spot when it came to how well they would match up against HLE and BOG. The big thing, if anyone had T1 as a third best team at this tournament, it would, of course, come down to how good Keria and Owner are supposed to be able to play together as a duo. The main advantage they have is that they play together for such a long time. They've had the highest peak in terms of how well they play together. And we had the expectations that they would, show us a continuous level of high performance that they showed glimpses of, especially for Owner. It was very, very rare that we got to see it, but we saw that it was there when it mattered most. And then Keria, of course, had a relatively strong spring split. And then coming into this tournament, T1, their experience is supposed to lead them when it comes to the decisions surrounding draft in terms of leaning into what their identity is. When it comes to past international tournaments, it was always their ability to kind of follow their gut and kind of push against a meta that didn't fit them. And yet today we had a situation where, sure, the tournament is about the AP's bot lane. We see that from Viper and Gumayushi, but those teams are built entirely different. On the opening game, we saw Paze trying to carry on Ziggs. He almost did. And we had a Mel as a second game. And, they tried to snowball the lane like they did in previous ones, but they couldn't get the ball rolling. And then when he started playing ADCs, then you finally got to see a T1 that could resist a little bit more because Paze was in a bigger position to carry. But the underlying issue there is, as they found their identity, the other players on the team could never find their form. Doran had a rough one, Faker had a rough one too, but the fact that Owner and Keria were outplayed by their counterparts, I think, is the main thing that is, of course, shocking. And if we look at that through that lens, if we just zoom out even more, their series against BLG in terms of what their preparation was, we had a series where Keria went through the series playing Camille over Bard. If anything, just as a side note, players doing drafts in terms of how they can funk out their own mind in terms of how good they are on a champion, if they should play on a champion. Everyone that is watching Keria's Bard thinks he should be playing Bard. The only person in the world that thinks he shouldn't be playing Bard is probably Keria. So we just didn't have, Keria Bard. He didn't have a prio on it. Ever since he called himself the GOAT, You know, ever since he called himself the GOAT and he said that his bars is not good, things have been, looking rough for the guy. But to isolate that series, we had a series where Keria went through a series playing Nautilus, Leona, Camilo Vibard, and you're just sitting there baffled in terms of, their read on who they are as a team. And this seemed to have not changed. They seem to have lost their sense of identity completely. They lost the reason why they even beat Genji to make it to this tournament. And that to me is the most surprising, because T1 frankly looked inexperienced. And based on that alone, MSI was never the biggest tournament for T1. It's interesting that Faker says, you're holding on to old memories. But my man Faker, you haven't won MSI since 2017, bro. That shit is, it's been a while, brother. And the statistic that they haven't made it out of a international since the beginning, outside of the top 4, is a very impressive statistic. But here, T1 today looked very inexperienced. And for that reason, I'm going to give them a solid 9 out of 10 on the fraudulency alert. Just compare T1's coaching staff to anybody's coaching staff at this tournament. G2's coaching staff, HLE's coaching staff, Danny is cooking, bro. The Ego Wrangler, bro. Look at these coaching staffs, what they are doing. Tom Mata, call them Tomata, bro. They are not doing enough. They are not doing enough, man. Tomata, that's all ketchup, man. They need to step up.
They need to catch up.
That's good. 9 out of 10. And again, a lot of it due to just kind of losing the identity. Jamada, what did you make of this series, and what is the fraudulency scale here? Actually, not even just the series. Just
it's just MSI,
the T1 run here at MSI.
I mean, I think the thing for me, on top of everything that Yamato said, is just from a gameplay level, they looked significantly more lost, and like their overall problem solving in certain situations was just a bit bizarre in almost every series, except maybe the BLG one was the only one where it felt like, hey, like this is pretty traditional T1 that we know, where it's like, hey, one side of the map is being attacked really aggressively. We know we can't match numbers. Let's go do it elsewhere. Or we know that we need to play through mid this game, or whatever it is. Like they had answers, I think, for a fair amount of the T1, or rather of the BLG series. But frankly, I think it's more that there was actual underperformances on the Rift. Everyone is going to point to the preparation. Everyone's going to point to the drafting and this and that and the other, because obviously it's been the main focus of the discourse. But when you actually sit down and watch the games, even I felt like today, versus G2, Keria and Ona, something I noticed that Keria and Ona don't actually play on the same screen as much as other elite jungle supports do. And sometimes it can be to their benefit. Like, I'll give you an example. The sequence where Bin died 4 times in a row in game 4. A lot of that was actually off the back of Ona showing somewhere and bluffing that Keria was with him, and then Keria was actually on the other side of the map, or vice versa. So it can work, and when it works well. But then you get games like today where they're trying to force plays almost in isolation, like the game 1 or the game 2 rather. Or was it the game 1? The Vayne game was the game 1, yes? I'm already forgetting. I'm old, man. But like the Vayne from BB game.
Game 1.
Game 1. They tried to kill him. Keria and Doran, they tried to 2v1 just like on a bit of a fast one. But Ona's bot, he's pathing towards bot. He wants Dragon. He doesn't want anything to do with this play. T1 weren't set up for this play, and G2 were more than ready to respond. And that's the kind of thing where you do that versus a BLG or a HLE. Not only are they going to eat you up like G2 did, they're going to take more of the map for it. And that's something that I feel like when you zoom out and you look at a lot of different portions of the tournament, that Ona and Keria were really not playing off of each other in a meta that kind of demands that be the style of play from your jungle and support. So yeah, I think the level of play actually shown on the Rift was poor, with the exception of Pays. I feel like Pays was the only guy, and everyone is visible as well. Like this is Pays, I think, dropped 4 performances that are now listed in the most damage per minute at MSI this tournament in the history of MSI. He was trying really, really hard, but they just could not get over the line. And yeah, like Yamato said, they really couldn't find an identity, I feel like, that suited them. And I want to point to Fearless for a second on this. Not saying it's inherently Fearless's fault, but I feel like it's this weird cage where trying to actually develop a play style or play out of a meta, I think is a lot more difficult with Fearless in. And obviously T1 historic, the big one was 23 Worlds, right? They changed the entire bot lane meta just because they were able to. And we saw the immediate effects of that in quarterfinals compared to Swiss. Here at MSI, especially with the tight turnaround of this year's MSI, especially, you just can't do that. And I feel like that was a big wall. And to top all of that off, to actually touch on the prep for a second, Tom said they were thrown off by the Kled pick in an interview. Now I don't know the context of this interview. All I know is that is an answer he gave with his whole chest. And I think that really shows you the level of understanding of their opponents and also to a degree themselves. So for me, the fraudulency is just a raw 10. Like I would just expect more out of T1, even under these circumstances. And they just could not find it in themselves at any point. And I feel like they looked disappointing for an overwhelming majority of this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to that interview and, ask my lovely wife to translate it properly to see what that means, because that just, as you have said, is egregious. That is egregious to not know that BB has that in the pocket. Like, that is a pocket pick he's done before, and
he's played it 8 times this year, and he's not lost.
100%. Like, it just can't happen like that. Can't happen like that.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 and a 9 out of 10. I think for me, after watching them all year long and watching them over at, Miss Out on First Stand and even at Road to MSI, it just felt like it was a matter of time. Like, it was a matter of time before they got caught. It was a matter of time before the magic would run out. And I would keep picking them until they finally got caught. That's why I picked them against Gen G. But these flaws were there. And Doran just happened to find a flank on Olaf in the Gen G series that kept him in it. Whereas here, that just didn't happen. It did not happen. I think there was a lot of burden on Pays, especially that last Game 4 team composition, to play perfectly against a lot of potential dive. And that was, I think, just a bit too far. So coaching and Doran, and that's where I want to go ahead and close this section off from both of you. Just the thoughts on Doran here, because it split the fan base. People are like, it's not Doran's fault. It is Doran's fault. It was very interesting to watch on Twitter to see the stands go at it. It's a fraudulent Pedro peoples or whatever, the Reddit subreddit for Cadril. We're going in on it. So Jamada, you first. What do you make of Doran here with the squad? And then Yamato, you get in there.
Look, I think both things can be, to a point, true. I think Doran in draft was thrown under the bus a lot. But I also think even under those circumstances, in a majority of them, he just played sequences very poorly, right? Even today, I'll point to the game 1. It's like, or I'll point to a few examples. Game 1, he's playing versus Vayne. He just bases in BB's face. He gets run down for it. Game 2, you must know what the Uric Cho'Gath matchup looks like. Don't press your maiden button, bro. If he's in front of you, he just pressed it like quite a few times, if I recall correctly. And yeah, like, again, I feel like when you look at MSI and the matchups he was in, I actually can't recall him being in a winning matchup almost all MSI, even if he had second pick. So I think, thrown under the bus a little bit by T1 and how they were drafting, and obviously he's got his own autonomy in what he picks to a degree, I'm sure. But he also played very poor this MSI at the same time. So, and I think he was a big contributing factor as to why they ended up losing today too.
Yamato?
On my end, I don't think Doran is responsible for the entire failure, but I also think that, as much as I would clown on the T1 coaching staff for the prep work, it's also the players are also responsible for making sure that they're in good positions. And I think the lack of a champion pool for Doran, an effective one really, was a difficulty. Especially in the BOG series, they blind pick Ambessa into Renekton. Like, as a top laner, like, you know that shit is coming. You're blind picking Zahen to play into Jax, bin Jax, you know that shit is coming. You blind pick Olaf, you know, it's just as simple as pulling up Lolalytics and looking at the biggest counter to Olaf is Kled. You know, like, these are things that you need to do good research on. And I do think that the flaw in the prep perk is partially because of poor research, but also partially because of the lack of tools that Doran then offers. And maybe there was a world where the downfall of Sion was exaggerated. Maybe he could have played more of that. He could have maybe set himself up to play more Rumble cases, something that he just didn't do. I don't understand why they moved away so harshly from some of the champions that they did have success on in terms of their play patterns. And I think they could have just leaned into that a little bit more because Broken Blade isn't known for the most, known for being the most punishing as a player. He's the type. He's more of a cerebral player in the sense that he finds impact on his champions as the game progresses, and I think that they could have done a better job of exercising that. But I think that in terms of what Doran offered is also what we kind of expected. I think that last year what we saw in his run up to MSI was a very unique one-off, like in the series that he beat Zeus. When Zeus got reverse swept against Genji just a couple of days before, right, in Road to MSI, and he played more of a carry role on the team. That was such a unique segment in Doran's career that was so opposite of everything else he's done that you gotta just go back to the original strengths. And I think Doran was very bad, for sure. I think that the underlying question, right, is does Doran deserve the seat of top lane on T1? And I think in a world where, like, if Keen is going military next year, the names that belong on that seat, of course, dwindle. There's not a lot of top laners that you would instantly slot in. It's a very difficult question to ask. But for me, it just comes back to that original drama of Zeus being let go to HLE. Because what could have been, right? What could have been? And I think Doran played bad. He deserves criticism, but my boy Owner and Keria, like, Keria was the worst support. As much as we've glazed Keria, and rightfully so, he was worse than the Light when they played against each other. He was worse than On, way worse than On when they played against each other. And today, he was also worse than, of course, Labrov. And I never thought I would utter these words when it comes to the context of Labrov, but Labrov he's doing tricks, you know, he's doing mad things. So I think everyone deserves a lot of blame here for T1 because there's just a lot to give. So Doran deserves shit, but you know, the off season is going to be spicy because I don't think the T1 fans or the T1 org should tolerate, you know, another year of Doran unless they just randomly win Worlds again, because that's not outside of the question.
I mean, well, we've seen it in the past. It doesn't matter if you win Worlds. Guma still moved on. Zeus still moved on. So we'll see what they have in store for us here for T1. The only member of that first team squad at T1 that does not have a contract through the year is Doran. And as we've said in the past, Zeus is available as a free agent at the end of the year, unless Hanwha go for a signing. I'm looking through the other top laners. Perfect is available. Casting is available. We'll pass through Gen G for the supers. I mean, Dudu has looked terrible. And then
when is Broken Blade's contract up?
Don't kill me.
2099, dude. 2099. G2 sign him forever. He has a forever contract. Yeah, so Kingen maybe? I mean, yeah, Kingen's available for Nongshim Red Force. You know,
we just say names.
On the tires.
Kingen's been ass this year. Come on.
What about Shiwu?
Shiwu's 2027. They signed him.
Oh, okay.
I mean, yeah. So we'll see what happens here in
What
the
an awful lot.
future
It's
with that squad.
strange that we're lacking Korean top laners, you know? Like,
It feels
strange.
rare. It feels rare that we have a. Yeah, it feels like that. Like, obviously, you can always say that about like Korean, but like top lane especially, it feels like there's just terrifying top laners always.
Well, they've moved on because it's Thanatos over Cloud9, Rooster and Kana over in Europe. So I feel like those were the guys where they're like, I could be on, I don't know, DRX, or I can go and try to make it out there and get an opportunity.
We just, you know what we do, you know, for T1? We just bring back Smeb, Khan, Nuguri, and make them play, and we just see what happens. You know, like one of them is gonna be great. You know, like we just see what happens.
surely
We
got
just
muscle
bring them
memory
back.
still.
You know, we're just gonna have the Frankenstein of all the potential gold top laners. Just you know.
They did. I mean, Wadid and Yankos did have that Tijic like league invitational, and it was a lot of the old heads coming back on out to play. Ultimately, it was Hooney on that EU greats squad that ended up winning, but he was definitely getting fisted. I'm trying to think who. It was Marin. Marin was the one that was giving him the business.
Damn.
All right. Well, we've got another fraud to call on out, and I'm interested to see how the guys judge this one. But before we do, it's a time to remind you about our friends over at Manta Sleep, Yamato.
You know, Manta Sleep, in terms of what it is as a product, I gotta say, adjustable, breathable, you know, comfortable. That's crucial. You know, if you wear something through the night, you know, it needs to sit snug, and you don't want to wake up in a way where you have these marks all over your face, you know? Like, you know, how you sometimes like sleep on some random ass sheets in some hotel, you know, where, you know, it has 1 star, and the only reason it has 1 star because they put a little TV screen at the corner with 2 channels that barely have any volume. I don't know, sorry, I'm speaking of trauma. And you have all these marks on your face when you wake up, you know, we can't have any of that because, you know, in the end, you know, the sleep mask that you have, it needs to be comfortable on your face. And now, you know, I'm going through a phase now where I have to wake up very early. We got MSI, 4 a.m. You know, I need to go to sleep way earlier. You know, in terms of how powerful the sun is, you know, it grants all life. It grants us, you know, everything that grows, everything. It grants life. Your Manta Sleep, just this mask is just beating out the sun, you know, just beats it 1v1. You just put it on and then boom, blackout. Easy peasy. And look how good you look too. Look at Jamada right now. You don't have to be worried. You put them on, and you just look fantastic. You can use them on the plane. You can bring them with you wherever you want. True 100% blackout. As I mentioned before, adjustable eye cups, breathable, cooling materials. I have this variant. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I have this variant where I can connect them with Bluetooth. And I'm the type of person, I like listening to something, a little bit of something, a little bit of politics before I go to sleep, you know. I like to falling asleep. I just, you know, I grew up in an Arab household. So Al Jazeera was always on, you know, like Al Jazeera was always on, whether it was 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. So I have gotten adjusted to, you know, listening to those sounds. But if like my fiance heard, you know, politics going to sleep, she would just, you know, she would go insane. So with that being said, you know, make your sleep better. The fact that you can bring it with you is the crucial detail for me, for us, because we travel a lot. You know, dGon's currently at EWC and he's sleeping good. You know, it's like he puts the Manta sleep mask on and he feels like he's just at home. You know, so it's a blessing. So with that being said, head on to mantasleep.com. Use code LFN for 10% off your purchase. That is 10% off your purchase. You know, sleep is crucial for anything, whether it's you know, overall function, overall comfort. Don't skimp on your sleep quality. Manta Sleep is what is going to improve it and keep it consistent. So thank you to, of course, Manta Sleep for sponsoring this episode. Use code LFN.
Yep. He was talking about the Manta Sleep sound mask. That is what I have, the Bluetooth that plays in there. And it's been fantastic here in France because the air conditioning is just... I mean, it needs to be on, but it's loud, and it just helps me fall asleep. So thank you to our friends over at Manta Sleep. I have a direct quote, guys, from one Mr. Jamada, where he says, but it's like Team Secret Worlds aren't going to beat top esports unless we see the most tragic joke of all time. End quote. So, guys, let us dive into the fraudulency scale of ourselves, but mostly Jamada and top
Okay.
esports for failing to beat Team Secret Wales. Yamato, let's start with you.
Top esports. You know what makes the tapestry of top esports history even more tragic, and somehow, just so deserved, because maybe it is God's way of enacting justice to prevent top esports from qualifying to the World Championship. We have a rumor that they want to get rid of FengYue and trade him for Zeus from NIP. And the fact that you walk away from a tournament and you decide, you know what? That move Weibo did when they got rid of their support that is performing so well and bring in some random ass name that has just been completely mid and mediocre the entire career, let's bring that person in and back to the team. That's what Top East was planning to do. They're just continuing, It's like they're doing some Street Fighter 3 Ryu shit, They're juggling the fraudulency in the air. They're up there. They're on 16 combos right now, They just keep going. Because obviously, this MSI was as bad as you can imagine. It's just the level of collapse. I don't fault the newcomers, because honestly, Zweyan and Mr., of course, FengYue, they had a good series against G2. They weren't the problem. They performed well. They had a very bad series against Team Secret Wales. But, the level of, the level that Tian and Jackie brought to the table just wasn't enough. And Cream was insanely lonely. I think Top Esports might just be the most fraudulent org ever. I think that Jackie Love is probably the biggest choker in the history of League of Legends. I don't think anybody comes close in terms of performance. I thought he was okay against Team Secret Wales, but us that watch LPL, we compare it to how well he plays in the LPL the majority of times. There's such a big distance in that performance. I think Top Esports is just the biggest fraud of all time. We should make an episode on all time and just do the all-time greatest frauds, and Top Esports is definitely it. There's a partial thing where everyone expects them to be shit, and somehow, the bar is so damn low, and somehow Top Esports out here just limbo dancing in hell with Satan, they're just so deep into the ground. I have no idea what's happening. So, 10 out of 10, easy. 11 out of 10, 15 out of 10, just infinite times 10. Screw this org. Rebrand.
It was just so... I think you can get away with like a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 because it's expected now. But then the roster move afterwards against the young, promising support just seems so stupid. That's where it's like, oh, we're adding new levels to this, Jamada.
It's mind-numbingly stupid. It's almost, you can't even really give a comment on it almost, because it's that nonsensical. FengYue was, besides Cream, who freed that guy. FengYue might have been their second best performer at MSI, man. Quite cut and dry as well. You could maybe make a soft argument for the good games that Tien had were so good that they outweigh some of the bad games, but bro, and the fact that it's Dro. Anyone who knows about Dro, when has Dro ever had anything that's been kind of special? From as long as I can remember, when I started covering the league in 2022, officially, to now, that guy has just been simply all right. That is the extent of Dro's potential, is just simply being all right. And if that's what they end up doing and that's the scapegoat, I feel bad for him. But also in this weird way, maybe it's like a freedom for FengYue to just get out of that org and not have to deal with everything that's obviously gone on at Top Esports. And NIP will probably have some degree of an okay-ish performance in the Nirvana group anyway. So I don't really know what to say. They're just so backwards. They're so backwards. And the way, and I'll make this comparison quite happily. The way that people like to talk about Chovy choking at internationals, that conversation to that degree and that like ferocity needs to happen about Jackie Love. We need to start having conversation because it is a consistency that it's unmatched. Almost every year there is something like this from Top Esports. Every year for like the last 5, 6 years almost. It's bewildering. It's bewildering. And all of these rosters have had potential, including this one, which is the insanity part. And this is maybe one of the weaker iterations of Top Esports. Like, yeah, I don't know. Losing to a Team Secret Worlds that just looked beside what Pun's their only player with Hitso if he's on Lee Sin. Come on, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And frankly, if they get rid of FengYue, they won't make it to Worlds. End of the year. They won't. I'll say that with confidence right now. If they make it to Worlds, it's a miracle. Like, it will need AO underperformance, JDG underperformance. You know, that's that Weibo. Well, I mean, Weibo probably won't make it, but like, you know what I mean? Like, Weibo also step up because they like to do it at the end of the year. It's disgraceful. It is, yeah, big time fraud alert. And it's 2x if they get rid of FengYue, and that rumor ends up being true.
I mean, imagine if somehow, was it World Elite would have beaten BLG a second time, and you would have had World Elite and Top Esports here. That would have just been a hell of a time.
They would have. WE would have had a more impressive showing at this tournament than Top Esports. I am convinced of it because they're actually exciting. They played the best teams at this tournament right now play the way that WE were predominantly playing in playoffs. Now, obviously, you can have conversations about the level of WE, especially like, you know, Captain Karras or Commander Karras and Captain Cube, right? But their entire game was driven through Monkey and Erha. The 4 teams remaining in the tournament right now, who are they driven by? They're jungle and support players. I don't think WE would have got their ass handed to them by Team Secret Worlds. I'm not going to say they would have beat G2, but I don't think they would have lost to Team Secret Worlds. I don't.
I mean, it's just the fact that Top Esports might have been the top seed then. It's just kind of crazy. Top Esports, let us know the fraudulency scale, including potentially moving on from FengYue and making him the scapegoat. It's laughable, and actually it's not even laughable. Now it's just sad. It's just sad. All right. Let's move on to now the flip side of kind of what we talked about. There weren't too many other matches, but the flip side of it, the positive sides of things here. The fact that G2 have done so well. It's our Galaxy Brain Club time here for the rest of MSI, the second half of MSI here. Galaxy Brain Club, the knockouts. All right. So with all these results, it also means this is one of the best results for Vietnam, which Levi got to celebrate with Team Secret Wales. It also is one of the highest placements for the LCS in a long time. It also means that G2 have an insane record so far this year against the LCK, minus the beatdown that they received at the hands of Hanwha Live Esports. That's a little different. Other than that, they've been fantastic. So when we think about this MSI so far, knowing that we've got 4 or 5 matches left, what do you think has been the most surprising storyline for you? And we'll start with you, Yamato.
Yeah, I think the what we just talked about, right? Like the T1 G2 series has been the biggest one. In terms of how everything's played out, we have a situation where T1 didn't make top 4, which is very, very surprising. I think everything else has gone as expected. We have HLE and BLG now in the upper bracket finals. They're playing tomorrow, and the main question mark was, will whoever gets the easier seed, are we going to praise NA or EU getting further into the tournament by just avoiding the big three? But G2 took the tough path, and they beat T1. Honestly, they could have 3-0 today. They were so much better than them, and I think that's the big storyline, honestly.
Do we believe here that G2 can beat T1 but also lose to LYON? Doesn't that feel like a very G2 kind of thing to do?
No, and obviously I've been someone that's been very positive about LYON in the past. And look, about these two teams actually directly, but this version of LYON is not the same version of LYON that I believe had an incredibly high floor and honestly the opportunity to really push their ceiling significantly higher. And it's weird because I think right now, like between Inspired and I think Isles has been clicking really good since the finals. This tournament has been a bit like up and down. He's had like good games and bad games. I think there's been some variance in there. But when he has his good games, he's genuinely a very solid looking support. But I just don't think that the vegan style of play where like I will very often credit teams like LYON for playing how they do because I think it demonstrates a certain level of discipline. But I think against a G2 who are trying to mold themselves on, how HLE play on very, very fast timings and giving teams very little time to react. And you saw a lot of that today, like the game one, the Jarvan game from Scumond, and how they were very responsive to the early looks from Ona and Keria in the jungle. I don't know how Inspired and Isles react to that style of play. Like if it's constant, and I expect it will be constant because that was one of the major things for G2 when they played versus HLE. I didn't actually dislike their prep at all. I think Yamato and I might have been one of the few people that genuinely didn't mind their like draft angles and stuff like that. My issue for them was their actual approach to the game in terms of I feel like for me it's bonkers to go into HLE and try to play the HLE game better than HLE. Now, I think that you saw flashes of potential of they can box with them in that style, but I don't think it was one that suited them. I think for LYON, if HLE, if G2 come into them like that and like how they came into T1 today in game one, I think it will be almost a pushover series because I don't think that LYON have the capability to deal with that kind of style of play if it's too fast. And I think that's what they've preyed on when they've been in NA. They can get away with it because teams in NA are very slow. Even C9, who are arguably the fastest team in the league, like they've gotten away with it. So yeah, I think to be honest, G2 should they're gonna have their way with LYON, bro. If LYON get a game, it's gonna be off the back of like a really crazy, like Inspired sets up the game for Berserker, or Saint steps up like crazy because Caps has like a mediocre like game, and it enables Saint in a really, really wonky way, which shouldn't happen. It happens like 1 in 10 games or 2 times in 10 games, something like that. That's the only way I see LYON coming out as winners in that matchup.
Ladies and gentlemen, with summer in full swing, so many celebrations happening this year, whether I'm heading to, of course, the backyard barbecue, where I'm playing Riftbound tournaments, running errands. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Baby Driver, but it's basically this man who, of course, is a great driver. And basically, what's so beautiful about that movie is the fact that he always has headphones on to kind of tune out this tinnitus sound that he has, tinnitus. And everything that he does is kind of to the beat of a soundtrack. And every time I go to the shop, I feel like I put my Raycons on that I don't need to charge ever, and I feel like I'm walking to my own soundtrack, I dodge the cars, I do spins and twirls and I move around with the bag, and it's possible because first and foremost, I'm one of the most forgetful people ever. And I think the last time I charged my Raycon earbuds was like 3 months ago. And I go to the shop daily. I go to the shop daily. I put them in. I walk to the store, and I haven't thought about charging them ever. That beautiful voice, or where that just speaks to you and says "power on, Bluetooth connected." I'm just waiting for that lady to tell me, "Yo, charge them." Charge them. What are you doing? She's just, it never comes. It never comes. I haven't charged it for forever. They're really light, very good to hook in, very easy to also remove. I think that's also a very important aspect. Like, you talk to people, you hear the sound, the fact that they're open air, you can adjust easily, with the touch buttons on the thing, which is super nice. Open ear design. I get to talk to the cashier, without doing all of that fumbling of the headphones and whatever, the awkward thing. Open ear design, lightweight and multi-angular hook. Like, I can just show them. Like, I have ears, and I have struggled with those in-ear buds that you have to like shove into your ear. I have very big ears, so for me to be able to just hook them on and they just rest there, and the sound is like, perfect, is very, very impressive design. And another detail is that there is multi-point connection. You can connect to multiple devices seamlessly without any hassle, which is super nice. And I already mentioned the insane battery life. 36 hours of battery life, 8 hours of playtime. And of course, inside you just have to plop them in and they just recharge. There's a battery in here that of course keeps them as lightweight as they are. So with that being said, the essential open earbuds are a great option for everyday listening. You got to listen to PowerSpike in style. Go to buyraycon.com/PowerSpike open to get 20% off. Thanks to, of course, Raycon for sponsoring. This message is sponsored by Raycon. Thank you very much, Raycon.
Again, got them on the road with me. Make sure to pick a pair for yourself. Done it multiple times here. Love my Raycons. What other storyline? I know I said the best, but what other storylines have jumped out at you that you want to give a shout to? Like, again, we do have all the 1 seeds and what we're saying about it and joking about it, but seeding in the tournament, Team Secret Whales, what are some others that jump out at you, Jamada?
I would say probably it's the seeding is a talk that I think is, it's one of those things where Riot will now look at this tournament and go, yeah, we were right. When the reality is I don't, well, they aren't. I don't know. I think because MSI has gone, broadly speaking, to our expectations, I guess maybe I think BLG aren't as strong as some people potentially feel like they are. I wasn't super pleased with their LYON showing. And even though they beat T1, I actually wasn't really happy with their T1 performance, weirdly. I really liked their draft and their prep into T1, but their actual gameplay, I don't think was something. It left something to be desired still out of this BLG lineup. And I think HLE are going to stomp them into the floor. Unless BLG come in at a really, really high floor, I think that's going to be a really one-sided series. Because I don't think I've seen a BLG that looked like to the degree dominant on their dominant days in like domestically, like throughout playoffs, here at this MSI so far. I just don't think it's happened. Like, they played T1, and I think they looked very shaky on that day, and it still got dragged out to 5 games, and LYON are LYON, and they stonewalled them for 30 minutes. An NA team stonewalled BLG for 30 minutes. I'm concerned for them. I'm concerned for them going into HLE. I really am. That would be something I would like maybe a little bit more focus on. Is I don't think this BLG is potentially as sharp as we may anticipate them to be.
Let me hit some beats here.
Go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
Because the storylines, it's more about what's to come. I do think LYON's gonna get smoked by G2. I'm with you there. I think the only potential edge they have is that maybe Berserker can play a little bit better than Hansama. But Labrov versus Isles, Caps versus Saint, Broken Blade versus Dokla, like these are not even matchups at all. I think that Lions series against BOG, like BOG, they have a history of making it very obvious when they don't care about who you are.
Yeah.
Similar to, like they walked in that series and the way they were drafting was really disrespectful, and it kind of looked like how T1 was in play-ins when I saw BOG play against Lion. Similar to how they play against some series they played in the LPL, even the best of fives, whereas like BOG is like taking it very half serious until they just flip a switch and decide to win. Sometimes it went too far. They dropped the series against WE, of course, and WE was willing to drag them down into the trenches and figure out a way to attack their biggest strength. But that's very unique to WE, and I don't think anybody else can do that. For me, the main thing, when it comes to the BOG versus HLE matchup, I do think that HLE has looked better at this tournament, but also, HLE, they played like a relatively dirty game against Team Secret Wales. HLE had relatively soft opponents, and I do think that matters in the equation. Like HLE made it all the way here without having, a top opponent. And BOG, I do think against T1 specifically, it was very obvious that they were kind of warming up to that series, because as the series progressed, I did in fact think that they were playing better and better, specifically like Knight and On and Shun. I think if you compare their gameplay from, just game one and some of the mistakes we saw from On and even Bin on the Jace, it was progressively getting better and better as they were getting adjusted to the stage. My main piece of, let's say, the angle I have for BOG is that I do think that BOG is a very tough team to measure until you get to see them play the opponent that they need to beat. I think that they have a very clear history of just matching whoever they're going to be playing against. And I said very early on that I think that whoever is going to come out as the best player in top lane is going to be the one walking away as the winner. Currently, I do think that Zeus is just performing way better than Bin. He's performing much better than him, and I can see that as being the potential edge. But for me, the main thing why I believe in BOG still is that I think that their jungle and support is just sharper. I do think that Knight is in better form and also in better meta than Zeka. But it's not so overwhelmingly to BOG's side because the differences are rather small. We're talking about a few percentages here, but I do think that On is better suited for the meta because it's his meta. He crafted this shit. And I do think that, in the grand scheme of things, I think that we're going to see BOG versus HLE twice. We're going to see it tomorrow, and we're going to see it in the finals. Because as much as I love the G2 run and the G2 story, I don't think that Caps and Broken Blade can be as impactful as they are in these games against T1, for example, against the likes of the ZZ Topside or Knight and Bin. It's a very different game to qualify into, and the challenge of that is very, very different, while T1 solo laners are definitely a big weak point that just G2 took advantage of. So I think we're going to get two series of BOG versus HLE, which makes it even more interesting in terms of how they learn and improve against one another. So I'm just hoping for parity in the first one, that we actually get to see the prep work real time and the improvements real time, because we are blessed with, really, really two stacked teams. And if there's another story that I want to hit on in terms of narratives for MSI, something you got to follow is how well is the departure from T1 aging for the players that, of course, remove themselves from the ZFGK roster. HLE now, they won, of course, a split. I think getting first seed counts as winning a split in my book. I don't care what people say, You are number one after a double round robin of best of threes. That's winning a split in my mind, and then winning the BO5 to get the first seed. No finals, Screw LCK for that. Sorry, dGon, I don't want to put you on the heat, but I like finals, shoot me. But I do think that HLE and the storyline of Gumayushi and Zeus, if they win MSI here today, you have to think to yourself, what a great decision. Because suddenly we're looking at Gumayushi and Zeus in a very different light. And outside of T1, they're making stronger and stronger arguments for being the GOATs of their position. And if Zeus, for example, puts an MSI under his belt, especially top lane that is so damn contested, damn, it's going to be hard and harder to say that he isn't the GOAT if he manages to make it here. But the same thing for Ben.
And the fascinating thing for me with those two is the fact that Guma left to join the same team that Zeus did, right? He could have gone anywhere. He had offers, and he ends up joining Zeus. I feel like on separate journeys that happen to be together now, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't like, hey, I want to go play with Zeus. It was, this is the best spot for me, and it happens to be with Zeus, and now we're going to have that whole former T1 narrative, and that to me is, as you said, going to be very exciting to watch and read. And we'll get into what we think is going to happen with Keeper Kick. All right, time for Keeper Kick, y'all. I've kind of skipped past many of the other parts other than the fact that we're going to go straight into HLE or BLG. No one seemed to be able to match the HLE style, so let's get into it and make it official and have it on record. It's this week's Keeper Kick. Also, if you're at home watching this segment and like, that's disrespectful, you shouldn't do that. G2 can win, LYON can win. That's fair. I guess you could say that, but we're realistic here, and we go with the probability of it of what's likely going to happen, which is HLE and BLG playing twice, as Yamato said. So Jamada, what you going with? Is this HLE supremacy here, Korea's last hope, or will it be BLG keeping the golden road alive?
Okay, so yeah, I was gonna ask for the clarification. This is for the whole tournament, yes, not just the best of 5.
Correct.
How is it different, Jamada?
Well, look, I'll explain why I think it's different.
Okay.
I think that once, of course, like we said, G2 have their way with LYON. I think if HLE knock BLG to the lower bracket, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that G2 beat BLG. I don't think it's outside of the possibility. I think if BLG managed to beat HLE and knock them to the lower bracket, congratulations G2 Esports on a 3rd place finish. It was a wonderful tournament. But I think the safer of the two is realistically just HLE. I don't feel like I don't feel like BLG have it in them to fully like go the distance of a 5 game series right now versus HLE and win. I think they are the only team with the right components to do it, but I feel like HLE are too good. And normally I'm the guy that will back my LPL reps, but I just think that there is a level of inconsistency. And yes, sometimes you can see it, like they play against LYON, they definitely didn't care. Like after they managed to win game 1, they didn't care. There was a certain level of apathy that they had about how they handled the rest of that series. But I don't know. I just feel like HLE's style is very, very efficient. They have melded they've mastered this meta. Gumayushi is the perfect player to have in bot lane right now. They have the perfect top laner to have for this meta right now. I think the only X factor that I'm wondering about is how many of those weird picks from specifically the bot lane do BLG have prepped and ready? Because they went towards the Vel'Koz, right? Do they have anything else down there? Is there going to be a spanner that they can realistically throw into the Clockworks that hold it up entirely? that's the only angle I can really see here for BLG, because I think that Bin has had an underwhelming MSI so far. And look, important note to say, Bin is the kind of player that will step up to the occasion, right? It's rare that he underperforms. Like the fact that he didn't put Doran through the floor more in the circumstances in draft that he was given was a very, very big surprise. But I can't see it. I think the only two players that I can see having a high level of impact are Knight. Knight will have his say in this series. I'm convinced of it. That will happen. And actually Shun. I think we haven't spoken enough about Shun this tournament, to be honest with you. But on the other end, it's Kanavi, right? So it's like, how adjusted will Shun be to the Kanavi, history? Like Shun Kanavi, this is a rivalry that goes back a little while now, right? And that's why I think it's important to kind of point at him as a potential answer here into Kanavi in terms of just how these two teams play. I think if HLE give BLG angles to let the game be a little bit more jungle driven, which oftentimes I think they do because of their gameplay, then I think BLG will have a shot in both of these best of fives. But if they don't and they're able to shut down Shun, I think the entire system kind of collapses in on itself unless you get really monster performances out of Bin and out of Knight. So yeah, I'm taking HLE, I'm keeping HLE, I'm kicking BLG. I know it's the slightly safe and slightly boring path here, but that's just the way that I see it going. Again, unless we get the real weird hype timeline where G2 comes in and does some freaky nonsense. Because I think GLT, I think G2 had a much better showing into HLE than people want to admit. I'll be honest. I really, really think they did in the game 1 and 2. The game 3 is a write-off, but the game 1 and 2, that's the only like weird X angle. But I think between BLG and HLE, it is just HLE 70% plus of the time.
Yeah, I think for me here, before you dive in there, Yamato, is just if someone can answer Kanavi's aggression and the way it's linked up so well with the squad, I want to see what the response is from Hanwha Life. Like, I just feel like they haven't been punched in the mouth since they figured it out with that last place finish. It was cool. They got to show off like Gumayushi can still super hard carry in that performance earlier in the tournament. But really, will someone step on Kanavi? And if that's the case, who is going to step up? Zeka has had solid performances, but will he be able to do that against Knight? That is what I want to see. Yamato.
This might be controversial to say, but I think that HLE has not played against a strong jungle in a long time. I say this because Canyon and Owner, they haven't had a good run. They simply haven't. And I think that the LPL, if there is the one thing that they do have as an offer, people can criticize the mid lane pool all you want. But the junglers that you need to be ready to face off against in the LPL and the level of pressure they put on you is very different. Very, very different. Whether it's Monkey, Junjia, even Tian regionally, the amount of pressure that these junglers put on you in terms of your early game decision making and how precise you need to be in order to beat these guys. Obviously, Junjia and of course Monkey, they are very extreme in the way they play. It's very, very, especially Junjia, is very feast or famine. But when Junjia's on and his things connect, he wins the game very, very fast. Very similar to how Kanavi was doing things in the LPL. I think Kanavi is finally going to face off against a jungler that is used to it. And I think that is going to be a very big difference maker. Because I'm with you, dGon. I'm really intrigued to see how HLE react to a team that can contest you in the early game. Because HLE is a team where throughout the segments, the ease of execution in the later segments come out of how strong their early game is and how strong their laning is. And maybe they're going to brute force that against BOG as well. Because obviously I can easily sit here and make arguments for why LGO should win. I'm just sticking to what I said at the beginning of the tournament because I don't think anything stood out to me in terms of what we saw in the best of five so far for me to have contradicting evidence. Besides the big one, as I mentioned, I do think that Zeus is just looking much better than Bin at this tournament. And, if anything, Bin didn't have like a super exciting first stand before he played the finals and he got the MVP, right? Bin is definitely the type of player that can ramp up and see a player like Zeus and get excited about this proposition. But I think therein lies the nuance. Shun has played against Kanavi a lot. He has experienced against Kanavi super much. And outside of the JDG 23 year, I remember when we had the triangle of top esports, Kanavi, and AL, and of course, just BOG. BOG as a team was always, just beating out Kanavi, while Kanavi was beating out Tarzan and AL. It was kind of a triangle that we saw take form. Obviously, at the time, BOG were doing their jungle mix-up, but I do think in terms of what Kanavi offers as a player, it's something that the LPL teams are just far more used to. And I'm just intrigued to see that dynamic play out. I think that another detail for me is that while Gumayushi has been really good in the meta, I do really appreciate the additional depth that Viper brought to the table. We saw the Velcos, for example. I do think being able to go deeper in that pool and making sure that the game identity remains the same about drafting 3v3, stronger 3v3s on mid lane is going to be a very big central point. But I really think that these games are going to be decided in the first 5 minutes. Like, they're going to be decided in the first 5 minutes, and it's going to be stomps either way. Like, it's going to be stomp in one direction or stomp in the other direction. I think there's going to be very similar to what we saw with like BOG versus T1 in the World Finals, where it's like one team gets the lead and they're going to run away with it. But my gut feeling is just Knight historically against Zeka always does super damn well. That's the one thing one thing that deserves to be mentioned. I think Shun and On. I think the fact that they've played together for so long and are in good form, I think matters super much too. I think that's an underrated part of all of this is collective experience. This team, outside of course, the plug and play of Viper, has been through so much, and I do think a team like that is going to be able to ramp up and get better throughout the tournament. And I think the main question is, how will HLE react when they lose one game? I'm really intrigued to see that, because HLE has just looked so unstoppable, and how they react to the loss is going to be intriguing.
There you go. Like, ultimately, I think publicly, I like my job, and that'll be my take. There you go. I'll leave it at that. But the question is, can someone stop this Kanavi? And this Kanavi style, and what you said hammered it home, and I didn't even fully think of it that way. Who's better equipped to do it than LPL junglers and LPL, the jungle synergy of Shin and On? Like, that's going to be so fun to watch. All right. There you have it, everyone. Again, I appreciate my co-hosts, you all at home, Light as well, for putting up with some of the difficulties I've had here in Paris with the internet, with the scheduling, but history being made on the other side of the world in Korea, and I'm glad we had the coverage here. Thank you to all of our sponsors for making the show happen, all of you watching along and keeping us accountable when we say shit like the most tragic thing ever will happen if Top Esports loses. That's why I had to give us the call out there, Jamada, because fans were all over us on that one.
It was tragic. It was tragic.
But it was tragic, and then somehow they found a way to make it worse. Let us know what you think on those topics in the comments. If you haven't already, like and subscribed. And we will have all the action covered here for next week in the conclusion of MSI as we crown a new champion and we figure out if this golden road continues to get paved. See you later. Bye.